Well, good morning, Lionhearts. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion, your old pal Amy. And if you saw our last video, you know that we're in Minnesota. And today we are gonna do a vlog on a Minnesota legend. But not the Minnesota legend you see behind us. Not Amy, not Prince. Today, this one's all about CURT HENNIG. Mr. Perfect. Daze with Jordan the Lion begins now. And that was absolutely perfect. So we're not too far from the cemetery. Mr. Perfect died at the age of 44 while trying to make a comeback to the WWE. And here we are at Gethsemane Cemetery. So CURT's final resting place is actually inside the chapel mausoleum, but to access it, the easiest way is to actually go around to the other side. So we'll go over there. So we'll go around. Best way I can describe it is I saw that there's a statue facing where he is interred. So if you come around this corner, you'll see the statue right there. I always like to come out to cemeteries and I always like to check out the statues. So since he is overlooking Mr. Perfect, let's take a look at him. And then to find CURT HENNIG, he is right through these doors. So the doors that I just showed you were actually locked, so we came back around to the front and we'll show you. He's at the very top, right up here. You can see right up there Leonis, his wife, and Curtis. That was him. His father was a very famous wrestler, Larry the Axe Hennig, who I remember I was friends with Roddy Piper, and Piper told me that he set a world record, or at least a record for the auditorium when he first wrestled. He wrestled Larry the Axe Hennig, and it was like a 16-second match. He said he came out with 2 black eyes and broken arm and all kinds of stuff. But he did say that he was, when CURT HENNIG was coming up, the son of Larry Hennig, that Roddy Piper used to help give him pointers. And it was said when he was in high school that CURT was a fantastic athlete. I mean, he was good at everything. The name Mr. Perfect, when he eventually got it, was very fitting because he was an outdoorsman, he was an athlete in school, he was a wrestler, and he didn't want to necessarily be a wrestler when he graduated, but he just kind of fell into it because of his family. And living here in Minnesota, most of his friends that went to Robbinsdale, that was a famous high school here, that a lot of people that went there ended up getting involved in the wrestling business. So CURT eventually trained with Vern Gagne, who was a legendary wrestler, but also a legendary trainer. He helped train not only CURT, but Ric Flair. And Ric Flair said that it was one of the most grueling things you could ever do. On day one, you showed up, you had to do 500 squats and 500 push-ups before you even started, before you even did the running or got in the ring. He said it was insane. But if you could get through it, then you ended up becoming one of the biggest in the business. So CURT ended up going into the AWA and was a wrestler there as like a baby face. But he really became known in the world when he got picked up by the WWF. And Vince McMahon decided to make him this Mr. Perfect character. Now, what's interesting is, as good as he was at it, because all he had to do was really be cocky and just be a good athlete, which he was, and be a good talker, he didn't want to be that character. Surprisingly, he always saw himself as more like a cowboy character. So he was kind of begrudgingly thrown into being Mr. Perfect, but he was phenomenal at it. I mean, I remember watching this guy and just hating how arrogant he was. Him and the Honky Tonk Man, I mean, you watch them do an interview and you just couldn't like them. You just couldn't. They were so pompous and arrogant. And then when they got in the ring, they always delivered. So I remember a lot of those matches between Ultimate Warrior and CURT Hennig, and then of course CURT Hennig in that famous match with Bret the Hitman Hart in SummerSlam where he dropped the Intercontinental title. I was surprised to learn that CURT Hennig had a lot of back issues, like had back injuries, and that he had actually had a pretty bad injury before that SummerSlam, and they had to kind of baby him to get to SummerSlam so he could drop the title, because that's when Bret Hart had left the Hart Foundation, or was at least going off to do singles wrestling, and they knew that CURT Hennig could make him look good. I mean, that was a big part of wrestling. It wasn't so much being likable or unlikable, also it was being good in the ring and making the people that you wrestled with look good. And Bret the Hitman Hart would say that working with CURT was like having a night off. He actually said that he could wake up out of a sleep and just go wrestle CURT and have a 5-star match. And I used to listen to Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast, which was great because he said that CURT was one of those guys that was really good at teaching young wrestlers, showing them the ropes, but he was also, he was extremely well known for his ribs, his pranking. I mean, backstage in wrestling, when you're traveling together in cars and you're staying in hotels and you go to bars at night, these guys had pretty crazy lives. And CURT Hennig was one that was known for going out to bar with a lot of these guys, including his best friend, Rick Rude, who they went to high school together here, they trained together, and then entered wrestling together, eventually being in the WWE together and the WCW and everything. But they came into this, and CURT Hennig just was a natural fit, just an immediate natural fit. But they said that he would rib people and joke with them so bad. Like, if you were new and you left your luggage or anything out in the locker room, they would put it in the toilet, or they would use it for a toilet, or they would put it in the showers, or they would put like a bunch of chains and locks around it so you couldn't get your luggage open. You'd have to basically just throw it away. Or they said they would take your wrestling singlets and put a bunch of knots and locks and everything in it so you could never get it untied. Now, one of the funniest was that he was so well known for being a prankster that he was other pranksters would pull pranks and accuse him of it. One of my favorites was Ric Flair said he was on a flight one time, and it was when he was the world champion. He said he took a nap, and when he woke up, he all of a sudden realized that one of his eyebrows was missing. And he said what had happened was that Brian Knobbs of the Nasty Boys had actually shaved it off while he was sleeping. And as soon as Rick realized that his eyebrow was gone, he looked over at Knobbs, and Knobbs had shaved off both of his own eyebrows. And when Flair looked at him, Knobbs said, "That damn Hennig," and making Ric Flair think that CURT Hennig had done it. So he was legendary for this stuff. And Rick Rude was a real legit tough guy. I mean, he was a bouncer at Grandma B's, and he would intentionally get into fights. He would intentionally challenge people to arm wrestling matches. And so once they got into wrestling and they were out traveling, going to bars and everything together, CURT Hennig would go into a bar with Rick Rude and then find like who looked like the toughest guy in the place, and then go over there and start like befriending the guy and then saying, "Look at that guy over there with the mustache. He looks like he thinks he's something. Why don't you go over there and fight that guy? Or why don't you go over there and arm wrestle him?" And he would instigate these fights or instigate these things. Pretty crazy how their lives ended up heavily mirroring each other, because CURT Hennig and Rick Rude were best friends. They used to hunt and go outdoors, off-roading and doing fishing, hunting, things like that together. And they both had heavy injuries that sidelined them in wrestling to make them basically mouthpieces. They were used as commentators or managers for other people, but both guys were such great athletes that they really wanted to make it back into wrestling. So a couple of times they tried to fight back through back issues, and not long before CURT Hennig died, Rick Rude passed away, and he was in the middle of making a comeback. They thought, or what was kind of assumed, was that he was just overtraining, trying to come back, and overdid it with his prescribed medications. But CURT Hennig said afterward, because a lot of people kind of rumored that it was possibly a suicide, CURT Hennig said, "No way. Rick would never do that to his family. He wasn't that kind of guy. And I remember Curt Hennig saying, like, we all need to take a look at our life and kind of think about what's important. So it was weird that Curt Hennig would be making on his way to making a comeback in wrestling. He was supposed to do a fair show, like a state fair, and he was found dead in his hotel room. And the autopsy showed that it was acute cocaine intoxication. But his father, Larry, never really bought into that. They said that he was always pretty vocal about kind of thinking that there was more to the story than that, because he said when Curt took off for that trip, he had a Rolex and he had a couple $1,000 and none of it ever turned up. And he said Curt wasn't really a cocaine guy, so he thought that it was like just like a wrong night, like one night partying with the wrong people or something, because what he thought it was he thought that it was really like a mixture of painkillers and steroids, kind of the same type of deal that took Rick Rude. And at 44, it killed Curt Hennig. The end of Mr. Perfect. Pretty sad. And as a wrestling fan, as a kid, liking The Ultimate Warrior, who was one of my favorites at the time, plus Hulk Hogan, Mr. Perfect found a way to really make me hate him. One of the things that stands out in my mind the most was the time that he stole the championship belt from Hulk Hogan, and they showed him with a hammer smashing it to pieces, just breaking apart the belt. And I just remember just like my eyes popping out of my head seeing that. Now, Mr. Perfect's career really took off like in the early 90s, like 1990, 91, and 91's when Curt Hennig suffered that really bad back injury that basically sidelined him. But in that same year, he bought a family home, and we're gonna go to that family home because he lived there from 1991 until he passed away. And I'm gonna tell you what happened to the home after that. Before we leave, I noticed this children's garden. This was kind of a moving thing to see, so I wanted to read it to you. It said, "If tears could build a stairway and memories a lane, I'd walk right up to heaven and bring you home again." And then here you see there's some little footprints that lead up to a name that says Angie. And it says that this is dedicated to Angela Brooks. So we're driving about 20 minutes north to Champlin, Minnesota, where Curt's house was. So right here in this peaceful neighborhood in Champlin, right here at this house, Curt Hennig and his wife and 4 children lived here from 1991. The house was sold in 2010, and at the time of the sale, the front didn't actually have that arched roof right up here. That wasn't there at the time, but it was a pretty big house. In fact, it had Curt's workout room, 4 bedrooms, 3-car garage, and then there's a lake behind here. And sadly, what I saw online was that his wife, Leonis, had to sell it in 2010, just financial reasons, bad economy and everything. She couldn't afford to stay here. And so they announced it kind of discreetly to the wrestling community, but she was kind of hesitant about who she let view the house. So I guess at the time, they were asking for people to send emails, and then she would decide who she would show the house to, but the house was sold in 2010. But Curt would have lived here with the family from 1991 till his death in 2003. So truly the Hennig family home. Now, 2 of his children are wrestlers now, Curtis Axel and Hank Hennig. Rest in peace, Mr. Perfect. Kind of cool to see where he lived though. Here's the lake behind Kurt's house. All right, my friends, we're gonna call it a day. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this vlog and hope you remember Mr. Perfect. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. Have a great night. And Amy, take it away for us.
Goodbye.